Welcome to the UST Education recorded webinar series. This session is powered by US Transactions. UST is a boutique payment processing firm providing you with personalized service. We offer agnostic, best fit technology solutions for associations, nonprofits, and enterprise clients.
Awesome, Nicole. Thank you so much. And please pass along my big smile to the whole UST team. This is probably my second or third webinar that I think I've done with y'all over the course of the years. But full disclosure, today is new content. So if you see me fumbling just a little bit with today's presentation, it's not because I don't know what I'm talking about. No, I might not know what I'm talking about sometimes, but today's conversation is definitely new content. So if you see me kind of messing with my phone over here, it's because I've written a whole bunch of notes for myself so that I don't forget some of the important key factors with our conversation today. So I can't see all your smiling faces. But I think I can see, yep, there's the chat. Okay, good. So I'm just making sure I got all my bearings here. Okay, so today we are going to talk about what the survey says with supplier relationships and some of the outcomes that I've seen from the last 2 years of the supplier engagement survey that Insight Guide has done. So we're gonna talk a little bit about some of the statistics or some of the survey results that have come through over the last couple of years. But then the last part of today's conversation, we're gonna talk about kind of where the opportunity lies. So we do see, healthy and positive relationships, lots of opportunity for growth and growth that's actually happening now year over year. But what happens with the evolution of the, supplier vendor engagement? So before we get too involved in today's conversation, you might be like, Terry, okay, we're using the term supplier. Like, what does supplier really even mean? Okay. And I've had this conversation. I see Bruce is here. I see Barbara is here. I've had this conversation with several other consultants in the space. And words matter, right? And so before we get started, let's just talk about what this term supplier means, okay? So how we quantified supplier within the survey is like it's a company or organization that provides products, services, expertise, or solutions to an organization's members, and they invest resources in the association to gain visibility, access, and business opportunities. Okay. So that's in general what we're talking about today. So you're going to hear my nomenclature today using the word supplier. Okay. But what I mean is any company that is wanting to do business with your organization's membership. Okay. But I added this slide here at the beginning because it is such an interesting conversation so many times. And I would love to see in the chat what it is that y'all call your supplier community. I think the one that's not on this list is friend of, friends of. I love that one, but we don't often see that in the professional world. But the words that you use actually do matter. And the reason why is if you think about the term, the difference between the term, vendor, versus partner, right? Those do come across very differently. If you call them vendors, we're talking about building a sales program, right? If you call them partners, you're talking about more like building a relationship. So I thought maybe as you're just thinking about these supplier relationships today, that a slide like this might help you as fodder for conversations with your internal teams about what you call your supplier community. Think about the names that you're giving your supplier community shape how the staff is going to design offerings and how the staff is going to speak with the supplier community. It's also going to influence the pricing structure, right? So think about, does it make sense to give a prospectus based on what we're calling them, right? Or maybe we don't give prospectuses to people that are like corporate partners, right? So it'd be interesting to hear what y'all call, if anybody wants to chime in and let us know what you are calling your supplier community. I'm totally open to hearing that. It also signals expectations to the market. When somebody hears friend of, that almost sounds like, that is a very close relationship between the two of them. So it definitely gives signals to the market. And it also determines whether engagement feels transactional or relationship driven. And the last piece that word and how words matter is that it impacts whether suppliers are treated as revenue sources or actual ecosystems and contributors to the entire community itself. So just as we're going through today, no, I'm calling them supplier. That would not be what I would call it if I was at the helm of of running a sponsorship program or a partner program or any kind of supplier program. I would not call them suppliers. However, I am on staff with Insight Guide, and a lot of our association clients actually call their supplier community suppliers, and that's okay. Just be it's okay to call them all different kinds of things. So why this survey? Okay, so for many years, I've been talking about non-dues revenue. I love helping organizations, create, introduce, ideate around new programs that help with non-dues revenue. Like UST is a non-dues revenue generator for associations, right? I'm not just here for nothing, right? UST offers a program that helps associations generate new revenue. And I love learning about the companies that help support associations for these revenue generators. I love coaching associations on how they can come up with new ideas. I for dozens of boards, and even recently, I was in Jacksonville, coaching with a board on why non-dues revenue and diversifying your portfolio is important. And then we spent the next half of the session actually brainstorming and ideating together on what some of the new ideas can be. And so I just really have a love and a passion for building. If you're into human design at all, which is a little woo, but it's okay. But if you're into human design at all, I am kind of branded there as a fire starter, or a manifester. So I like to build things. I like to see things come to life and create. So it's just really a core passion of mine. But, um, you know, a lot of times, when I came on with Insight Guide, I thought, ooh, okay, now I have the resources to maybe dig in a little bit more on some of the data about how associations are creating these programs and what offerings are doing really well, maybe what offerings could do better, maybe what offerings could be sunset. And so what's waning, what's growing? And then also to gather the overall sentiments of what's, happening in the supplier ecosystem within associations and our organizations in our industry. What programs are doing really well? What are there outliers with some of the programs? What programs have the most promise? And then ultimately preaching that on presentations and content sharing pieces like this today, and sharing what the opportunities are for improvement based on that data. So here's a quick overall view of the survey. So it's not just kind of anecdotal feedback, based on some conversations. You'll see I do sprinkle in some of my own antidotes as I'll be speaking here today, but you'll be sure to see what is specifically related to the survey. But over the last 2 years, we've been gathering input from more than 300 association professionals. This data does include, the association's perspective, the consultant's perspective, anybody that's in like partnerships or events or responsible for revenue. And this is a great snapshot. I think it's not co-produced by a research company. So I will be the first to say it does have flaws. I'm looking at this survey as more of a barometer on how associations are doing in relation to this. And maybe someday a research company will pop in and will help us with this survey. But uh, but the overall kind of sentiment or view of what is going on, as I said here at the top, is that we have a positive and a great trajectory for where we are and where we're going. Um, so the good news is that we're not in ultimate crisis mode. What we're doing is working. But there are some opportunities or low-hanging fruit opportunities that we can examine where we can do better. So our survey, in our survey, we executed questions like this. Now, anytime you see this group of people with these little thought bubbles over their faces, that means this is a poll for you. Okay, so this is where you do actually please get to interact with the chat. And I'm hoping I'm not totally losing the chat here. I'm looking for it, but I don't see it. There it is. Okay. So we ask questions like, how important are suppliers to your organization's mission and operations? So if you can throw in the chat, extremely important, somewhat important, not so important, not at all important. And then I will share the results from what happened in the actual survey. Oh, I like partner or collaborator there. I think my chat just showed up. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks y'all for contributing here. I like y'all's thoughts on what you're calling them. Okay, so adjusting the relationship. Ooh, Patrick. I would love to maybe open your line and see what you thought about where you're at with adjusting the relationship. It sounds like you want it to be extremely important, maybe. Or maybe you want it to be less important. I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are on that. Somewhat important. Okay, interesting. Increasingly important. Okay, not an option. However, I like the way that you're coloring outside the lines there, Leanne. All right, great. Good feedback here. Okay, so here's what here's what the survey results over the last 2 years say. In a combination, it's over 80% say that suppliers are, are a part of the supplier community is a mission critical piece, and that their initiatives there are, um, you know, need to be tied to mission and operations. So if we say that suppliers are crucial to mission, or even somewhat crucial to mission, then the question becomes about our engagement models and how they're structured and what are we doing to align this critical mission related group to, what are we doing to enhance that mission critical relationship. So, um, you know, we're gonna like explore, and I want you to just maybe think about some of these questions. How are suppliers integrated into your strategy? Are supplier engagement points measured? How is your supplier community onboarded? And how are they retained? Is there follow-up that happens with with your supplier community? All things we're going to get to explore a little bit more today, but not before we don't jump into our next poll question. So our next one is, what are the key benefits your organization gains from your supplier vendor relationships? And if there is an other here, I would absolutely love to hear it. But your options for here and what we offered on the survey is financial support, enhanced member experiences, thought leadership, networking opportunities. Okay, and y'all are chiming in here. You notice what I did? I actually did give y'all a 1 through 5. So go ahead and throw 1 through 5 in there. And I'll tell you why. I'm hoping I can get my hands on this chat so I can actually see and measure what it is that y'all say compared to what the survey results say. So 1 through 5. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Thanks, Bruce. Okay, financial support. A lot of ones here, a lot of financial support, funding and education. Financial support. Yep, a primary. Oh, and volunteering. Ooh, okay, that's a great one. All right, what are there any other fives that I'm missing here? Let's see. Fives. What are my other fives? Five, opportunities to reach a larger audience. Okay. Yeah, that's good. Okay, Keith, what's your five? What's your other? I'd be interested to hear that. So here's what we found out. We found out that this is how the surveyors responded. Whether that not this is actually really true. Sometimes what they tell us and what they want us to hear, or what they tell us and what they really think might be two different things. Maybe, maybe not. But this is how the survey results shook out. So the company-led clinical education. Oh, okay. Yeah. So thought leadership. Got it. I like that. So here's what we found out, that enhanced member experience is number one in the responses. Financial support from sponsorships comes in a very close second. Thought leadership is a very close third. And then networking opportunities are actually down the ranking a little bit. Okay, Bruce says another five is credibility, association's alignment with good companies. Yeah, I love that. So kind of the reputation of the association and the alignment with with the organization echoes something of credibility or some kind of reputation piece to the organization itself. And I absolutely see that. For example, just to put it all out there right now is Insight Guide offers up the Solutions HQ marketplace, right? And that, we are hoping that that gives us credibility within the industry, that we are working in alignment with ASAE and other large associations. Of course, absolutely. That's a great one to point out there, Bruce. So another kind of fun fact that has bubbled to this, thank you everybody for contributing to those questions. Another fun fact that sort of bubbled to the surface is around growth. We asked a couple of questions related specifically to sales growth. Um, and what we discovered, there is actually growth that's happening, that the association professionals are saying that there is growth that's happening. You can see, the figures here. I'm not going to insult your intelligence, but you can see even this year in 2025, those numbers are increasing. And this is important again to note, because what we're doing means that we don't have a broken system. How we are managing these supplier communities seems to be in alignment with a growth mindset. Um, so supplier partnerships are, what we know now is they're seen as critical to the mission. Okay, y'all said it. Seen as critical to the mission. And we have this noticeable sales growth that's happening year over year, and that's pretty meaningful. In 2024, what we saw was that we actually asked a pointed question about where people were seeing this growth. And in 2024, what we saw was that growth was kind of across many different channels, events, content, digital opportunities, we have a whole giant list of all of these, all of these areas where there could be possible growth. And in 2025, what we noticed is that some of the growth is really being more contributed to events. Now, we can have an entire webinar on events, okay? And the growth versus, the comeback game that events is having right now and how it's evolved and changed. But it was interesting to me to see how much more emphasis is on the possibility and the opportunity around events in 2025 versus 2024. And, the events right now, I think, are coming back to carrying more weight. And I'd be intrigued if anybody else is seeing that kind of happening in their, in their entire offerings, their ecosystem with their supplier community. If you look at all of the offerings that you give to the supplier community, where do you feel like the biggest uptick is happening? Is it happening in events or is it happening somewhere else? And you know what? I'm actually going to skip out of this. How do I escape out of my little? Uh, I was going to show you all the survey. How do I get out? Here we go. So by the way, the supplier engagement survey is available from 2024. It's available. If you go to insightguide.com, there's a little form and you can grab these survey, or I will actually give this URL to everybody before we jump off the chat today. And I'll give it to Nicole as well so she can add it in the follow-up email if there's one that goes out. But one of the growth areas or the areas of the offerings for the vendors, here we go. So if we look at all of these, where are you seeing the most growth? And you can see here, like in exhibits and booths from 2024, it's high. It's even higher than that now in 2025. And some of these others are going down. And so I think this is an interesting observation because when we were in COVID times, we diversified our portfolios like crazy because our events dried up. Okay. And now if we're going back to kind of narrowing the growth, or the growth is kind of narrowing, going back to events again, then we're going to be back in an increased risk situation, you know? And as we know, some of the risks that go along with, you know, a lot of your revenue, or a lion's share of your revenue being tied to events is, economic volatility, attendance shifts. There's so many things that are happening at events right now that can contribute to how your attendance kind of like wanes or grows. And everything from location to weather to natural disasters to timing to other things that are happening, political environment and climate. It's so many things that can contribute to how your events, um, are being held, right? And also then changing buying behavior. This is something I've talked about for many, many years, is the buying behavior of our memberships. So let's go to the chat really fast. I just want to see what y'all are saying. Linking event support to year-round deliverables helps enormously. It's a win-win for partners and members. Yeah, I can see that, Barbara. Both companies say great event, but what about the other 360 days of the year? Yep, we're going to get to this, Bruce. Many companies want year-long value. Don't put all your events in the events basket. So if you think about, like, even I tell people, I question how, when I see an association dump all of their effort into event revenue, I ask people, I'll say, okay, well, how are you diversifying your portfolio at home? And people will say, oh, well, I've got some investments here. I've got some property there. I've got, maybe a gifted endowment or something over there. I've got, of course, my job. Maybe I even have a second side hustle or something along these lines. And we naturally want to diversify our personal portfolio. So why? We're not at risk, right? So I guess maybe what I would just beg for associations to do at this point, based on some of this data, is to take a look at where your revenue is increasing with your supplier membership, and just be careful, just be mindful of what you're offering, um, that is not just tied just to events. And we are going to talk in just a few moments about what the very best programs, supplier programs, look like. But until then, we've got one other question for you. Um, What are the key benefits your organization gains from your supplier vendor? Oh, I already asked this question. Just kidding. We're going on to the next thing. Oh, okay, let's see. Okay, so here's what we found out. Okay. Oh, did I go backwards? I went backwards. I'm just now repeating myself. Here we go. This is where I am in my notes too. So this makes so much more sense. Okay. All right. So when we look at, you saw just a moment ago, all of those possible offerings to our supplier community, right? There's a lot that's going on. So one of the things we wanted to observe in the survey is where, are there any struggles that are related to servicing the supplier community? And so this slide specifically highlights what association professionals were saying about the pressure points related to servicing the supplier community. So my notes here say, other than mission and growth, one of the areas in the reports that stood out that like this was a pretty significant standout point to us is like 74% actively were exploring new ways to engage their industry suppliers. And 70% are seeking better ways to connect their members with the supplier community. And so you can only imagine that all of those things that we're already doing, plus, are the pressure that we have on us to do more, do more, do more, is causing a real strain. So, association executives or association professionals that took this survey are expressing, insufficient time and resources. They feel like they have a, possibly have a limited supplier interest from, the actual supplier community. The suppliers themselves have budget constraints that they're defined in. And then there's a difficulty with aligning the expectations that they have outlined in a program and then actually meeting those expectations to the supplier. So basically, what we're trying to do here, I think the problem here is that we're trying to drive strategic growth with operational bandwidth. And that's what's causing these issues. So something else that stood out to me in the survey is the these expectations, right? So we have this expectation you know, with increased diversification of the portfolio. Not to mention, we probably have KPIs and goals, actual like real revenue goals that we have to hit, right? So in asking, association professionals about some of these other factors, these factors around growth, we thought also how can we get some of their sentiment? So what we noticed is that although we've got an increased sales, cycle that's happening right now, and we've got growth, we've got that chart's going up for us in general, the confidence levels on how we're going to maintain those sales is actually going down. So it's only a 7-point difference, okay? And not the exact same people took 2024 survey versus 2025 survey. And this is where having somebody that really knows research really well to examine this data could probably like tear this up and tell me how big of a factor this 7-point difference is. But to give you an idea, in 2024, 62% expected increases in sales, and only 18% expected decreases in sales. And then in 2025, we have 59% expected an increase in sales. So that's just a little bit lower. So we're going to say like that's about the same, right? 59 to 62% expect increase in sales. But excuse me, I said 18%, but I mean 16% expect decrease in 2024. And in 2025, 23% expected a decrease in sales. So of the group that expected a decrease in sales, And again, this is a small sample. If I had thousands of association professionals that had taken this, this might be some more reliable information. But what I will say is just like, again, this snapshot is fodder for conversation for us today. So I think it's an important signal to look at, you know, what is kind of like polarizing among these results. Growth is up, but I think maybe there is a little bit of pessimism that is kind of happening here too. And people are not quite as confident about going into the future. So, what's really happening here and like what's Terry's little speculation? Okay. How am I doing on time? I think I'm okay. All right. So, this is the second half of our conversation for today. And what I think is really happening is that, yes, okay, we see sales are up. I feel like I can kind of feel that in the market as well, just being in the wild, out in the association wild. You can steal that term because it is wild out there sometimes. And I think what we are seeing is an increase in the value that the vendor supplier community brings to our organizations. And that is from the likes of people like, you know, um, the PAR Rev Up Summit and the community they're building there, Non-Duzapalooza and the community that's built there, the good work of people like Barbara and Bruce that are here on this conversation today. They're everybody, they're Sean Soth and over PAR, Ed Byers, over Non-Duzapalooza. These groups of people are really trying hard to elevate the conversation around this community that associations have access to that we have for a really long time just kind of like put to the wayside, right? Or just like kind of taken advantage of them. And so, but then in conjunction with that, what we're seeing is that pressures are, and uncertainty around, the continued sales are kind of rising also. So we've got this, sort of speculation that we've got a confidence, maybe a little bit of a confidence issue about our future. So what that tells me is that we need to just get confident. Like we need to just get confident. And how do we do that? And one of the ways we do that is we educate ourselves. So I'm sure there are all kinds of other ways other than what we're about to explore right now on how you can improve your supplier community. But we're going to dive in on like how you can at least start with strategy. And I think strategy needs to be articulated. And then I think people that are running the strategy and the generations after that need to be held accountable. And leaders should no longer really assume that growth is just naturally going to happen. I think leaders need to be designing strategy and designing supplier programs that are actually in alignment with what the supplier community wants and how it aligns with the mission and the overall, organization's industry, the industry and the organization's mission. So that's kind of sort of my hypothesis with what is happening in the supplier community right now. So what is the strategy, Terry? So you're like, okay, so if we need to, change up our strategy or do something different or put pen to paper, what does that strategy actually look like? So I'm going to go through these 4 bullet points. Pretty much the rest of the presentation is this. We're going to explore what the high performing programs look like, some of Bruce and Barbara and some others have mentioned here in the chat. We're going to look at what the high performing programs are doing to be successful. We're going to look at the design of the vendor journey. A lot of times we hear this term member journey, right? But what about the supplier journey? Do you have a supplier journey? Do you have those mapped out? And if you do, I would love for you to share it in the chat with us. And you don't have to share the entire journey mapping exercise or the product that you have. But if you have one, I would love to hear that you've got a supplier journey mapped out. We're going to talk about how to structure your content intentionally and in relation to the supplier community, of course. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how you can measure and what are some of the things that you're going to measure with the supplier engagement other than just revenue? Because guess what? There's a whole lot more that you can measure that can tell you and give you the pulse on how your supplier community is doing. Okay, so let's jump to high performing programs. So, as we mentioned, event, you know, revenue is event heavy, right? Like those two are kind of going together usually. Like, you've got events, you're generating quite a bit of revenue from that. A lot of money is being spent on the events as well. So you've got kind of like these, this yin and this yang. But it's a big deal. There are lots of, massive programs out there. But what's happening is exactly what Bruce mentioned earlier. You have this 3-day event, and your supplier community spends so much money and so much time and so much energy and resource and manpower, woman power, and they come in and they get 3 days of visibility. Well, what happens to the other 362 days of the year, right? And so what we want to do is think about like some of the high performing programs have year-round visibility. It's not just around their events only. Some of the most high performing supplier programs, they bundle strategic partnerships. So it's more than just a sponsorship, it's a year-round strategic partnership. And again, there's like a word that sounds very different than supplier or vendor, which I've been just tossing around. And then they also have a clear measurement of what a successful supplier community looks like, or what successful, you know, uh, measuring part, benchmarking points are beyond revenue. And then they also have vendor or supplier information or content or thought leadership integrated into programming. And they have very intentional content guardrails as well. Now, this race car is a shout out to ASAE. This year, we're going to be in Indianapolis, so I had to get this high performing car in here. But this is really what we see is the most high performing supplier programs embrace these different pieces. I'm going to go to the chat for just a moment to see if there's anything I missed. So, Bruce, you just said sponsorship partnership journeys start with an understanding of each company's business objectives and marketing goals. Yes, I like that. And so I love the idea of sitting down with your supplier and saying, what is it that you really need and want from our organization? And identifying those is pretty critical to the success and the retention of their program. But maybe you wrap this up into developing these supplier journeys. So we're going to take the next few slides and talk about the supplier journey. So uh, so these are sort of this is a natural cycle, right, of a supplier journey. You've got the initial recruitment. Great question would be like, how did they find you, right? Like recruitment, how are you finding them? There's so many ideas around this, including, by the way, with the help of AI, you can actually you can unlock an entire supplier community that you may have never tapped into before. But what is your recruitment plan like? And then what happens if after they're recruited, after they become a part of your supplier community, what does that onboarding experience look like? What kind of visibility are they getting year round? Um, and then how are they integrated into your events, into your online community, into some of the opportunities and the rest of the membership that is available to them? And then how are you actually measuring their journey so that you can show them what they're getting, or the ROI, if you will, for being a part of your organization, so that they will then have renew with you and even possibly recruit someone else back to the top again, right? So if you think about creating the supplier journey, there are several bullet points that actually go underneath each one of these. But you could break it down. You can just start really small, okay? This might feel like a lot, like, oh my gosh, just thinking about, if anybody's done a member mapping exercise, it is daunting, right? And um, you know, but if you take any specific one of these areas where they are on their adventure with you, then and break it down into how you would want to be treated. Were you someone new coming into the organization, or someone that's renewed, or somebody that's been a long time supporter of the organization? What would you want that to look and feel like? So let's take just a quick little snapshot at a sample of the stages, the common gaps, and an opportunity to elevate with the supplier journey. So let's imagine that the stage is onboarding, okay? And the gap that we often see with onboarding is like what you just get the same member packet that everybody else gets, right? Or maybe you just get the prospectus. You know, are you getting some tailored education for the type of member that they are, or the type of uh, participation, how they're showing up? They might not be a member, but maybe they're, or is it just information about the next event that's coming up? How are you treating them? I like to think that when people come to my events, or people come to, you know, be involved with a program that I'm helping run, I would love to think that they feel like they are coming into my home, or that they're coming into having an expected experience that is elevated beyond what they're going to get anywhere else. And part of the onboarding program, a lot of people just don't have the supporting tools for success for the supplier community. So what could that look like? Well, could look like a personal phone call, maybe from a key volunteer, somebody in the C-suite at the organization, or maybe somebody that is on the board. What does that look like? Oh, that personal phone call, you could script this out for them so that when a new supplier comes on board, a phone call is made. And one of the questions asked is like, what do you want to get out of this organization? And it's going to start to reveal information to you about what your supplier community wants, so that you can start to design and align with that mission and serving your members on with what the suppliers want. And you're going to start to see those lines get less and less blurred. At a minimum, start with a supplier success toolkit, right? Like, how can they look successful? Like, what does success look like aligning with your organization? Okay, let's just take another one, another stage. We'll just randomly pick one here. How about oh, okay, so I like the renewal one. This one is actually a good one. So if they're in the renewal stage, then what you do is you say to them, um, okay, this is how you renew. Here's the renew button. It's going to cost $495, $295, 2,500, whatever it is that your market can bear. Here's the button on how you renew. Well, what if you were to offer them some metrics on how well they did that year? If they attended your event, if they co-hosted or sponsored a webinar, if they participated perhaps in your online community, or they had ads out there, or they were involved in whatever way they're involved, is there a metric that can be delivered to them to show them the kind of ROI that they got? And then what you could say is there are other suppliers that have the next level up that are getting this, that are getting even more. So would you like to take the next step to the next level and upsell them, because you're showing them the ROI that they're getting from your organization? So these are just some sample pieces of showing how you can break down the stages, and where there might be opportunities for you to, make these areas on the journey better for them. One thing to remember when you're creating these member journeys and not to like add a whole nother layer of work on top of it. But not all suppliers are created equal. Just like, I remember when I came on with FSAE as the marketing and technology director many years ago, like more than 15 years ago. I think it was 17 years, 18 years ago, something like that. Um, I was in the era of when social media came about, and I was in the era when we were starting to sunset, actual hard copy publications. Don't we miss our hard copy publications? Yes. But when, we were sunsetting those hard copy publications and news and hard copy newsletters, and we were starting to serve up materials in a digital format and social media, and then video came along, and then SMS came along, and then apps came along, and like, oh my gosh, there's so many different ways to market to our audiences. And I remember that feeling like the biggest hurdle for me was to segment and be able to deliver in a way that our audiences wanted their information to be received. It's kind of the same thing for the supplier community. They're not all equal. And this has been brought to light for me more recently than like probably any other time in my association career, is that like communications really need to be tailored based on the kind of organization that they are in the supplier community. If they're a startup, maybe they want more visibility, right? Maybe what you put in front of them is opportunities to get their brand out there, to be able to maybe get in touch with more innovative groups that might be interested in betaing something, right? Like that's really powerful for a group that looks like a startup versus a group that is a consultant, right? The consultants probably want very different things than, say, a tech startup. And so when you're having these phone calls and when you're delivering these toolkits and when you're delivering this messaging and communication to these different types of suppliers, just think about who it is that you're serving and who you're talking to. It's like kind of just like the 101 marketing, like know your audience, right? And so remember that, just be reminded that not all suppliers are equal. So if we think about the member journey, and you already probably, hopefully, are kind of like starting to think about some bullet points that would go under each of these areas of recruitment, onboarding, visibility, integration, measurement, renewal. Where is it that you think your organization could gain, or like, where could you have the most improvement? I'd love to hear it in the chat, and I'm going to take a peek at what the chat's doing right now. All right, so let's see. Oh, I love that. It's good to ask companies about how they measure success and deciding about renewals. Companies' goals can change year to year as the company evolves. Yes, I love that. So they could move from startup mode into what do we call it? Maybe corporate buyer, right? So imagine they had like a 5 amazing years. They got moved out of startup mode and now they want to invest more money with you because you've shown them the ROI. It's beautiful, right? Okay, so we see opportunity looks like a lot in recruitment. Measurement, yes. All right, good. I love the measurement showing up so much here because we're actually going to talk about a whole bunch of data points today. I know, and you're like, okay, Terry, we have 9 minutes, but I promise I'm going to get through this very quickly. And then we can leave a couple minutes for Nicole to put a bow on our day and also maybe answer a couple questions. So you'll want to think about how you're structuring content intentionally. Three things that just kind of stood out when I was thinking about this presentation today is like you want to define thought leadership standards and share the reason why. Those two kind of go together, but I do have them separate. It's really important to share the reason why. And the biggest piece of that is because your your association is represented by what it's producing. Think about that. So the credibility of your organization is dependent on what you're putting out there for your events, for your thought leadership. So that's important for your supplier community to understand. And you and I, we all know this on this call here today. But guess what? they don't necessarily understand that. So it's really important to communicate the why on that. And then packaging your content strategically and also customizing it. Again, kind of back to a bullet point that Bruce always brings up is like customizing your, the package that they get from you, and including maybe some possible helpful hints on what kind of content they can produce so that it hits home to the membership. All right, so many of y'all said measurement, so we're just going to go ahead and scoot over here into some engagement points. So measuring the engagement and outcomes. So we've got two slides here. I'm going to go and flip to the second one so you can see what we're doing. But we've got measure overall metrics, and then we also have measure engagement outcomes per supplier. So if you're thinking about, we've got to start with just a single supplier and what are we measuring there? And then how do we take all of those results and then what else do we measure as an organization wide on what that, on the entire kind of ecosystem of our supplier. So per supplier, these could be some different engagement points that you could be collecting on. Event participation, easy one, right? Content contributions, also very easy to track how many of those are going in and out. Ad placements. Okay, it's not just ad placements, but there's a whole laundry list of bullet points that go under that. Many of us have been doing ads for a really long time. There's some clever ways to do ads now, though, through like uh, oh my gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't, please just escape me. Like redirect marketing, like direct marketing where they come to your website and then sponsored redirect basically. So then when the ad shows up on the World Wide Web, retargeting. Thank you, Barbara. I can appreciate the brain help, the brain support there. Sponsored retargeting. So there's all kinds of unique opportunities underneath the ad placements where you can be tracking engagement points. Plus, like the Google gods and the Google Analytics world that's going on there and the BI tools that are accessible to us are just like they are enterprise solutions out there that don't cost a whole lot of money anymore that can really shed a lot of light. So those are pretty easy to collect. But then RFP responses. Do you have any idea what kind of RFP responses are happening between your members and the supplier community? Do you know what that looks like? Are they getting it on the show floor? Are they doing it electronically through some sort of opportunity that you're providing them? How are they showing up as volunteers and what kind of committee involvement are they involved in? What kind of data are they trying to access, or do they have information that's out there that they're trying to collect? Do they have their own surveys? Are they asking their own polls of your community? What is happening with how they're accessing your membership? And then community activity, are they involved in, your online forum? And then what do the retention and renewals for that individual company look like? So those are all metrics that you can start measuring today. And then once you start measuring some of those pieces, then and collecting those, then you can wrap that up into one giant metric system that gives you a great snapshot of how your supplier community is doing and where some of the opportunities are and maybe where some of the weaknesses are. So overall metrics might also include the total non-dues revenue, the revenue per supplier, revenue concentration risk. I wonder what I meant by that because I didn't add a note to myself here, but revenue concentration risk, Terry, remember what that means. I can't remember exactly what that means. But if eggs in one basket, oh yeah, okay, so that does make sense. So like, is all of your revenue coming from events, right? Or is it all coming from, webinars or something like that? Where is the concentration happening? And then how can you diversify your portfolio? Renewal rate by engagement level. So if you're gathering these engagement points, then what is the actual renewal rate based on like if you put everybody who had 1 to 50 points, let's just pretend that's a terrible way to handle it, but if you're 1 to 50 points, then everybody that's got, up to 50 points, what is their renewal rate? Their NPS, their net promoter scores, how much are they cross-channel participating? Are they just coming to your event or are they also coming to your event and doing a whole bunch of other things? And then the average engagement depth. So out of 100 possible, 100%, what is it that they're engaging in? And what we know is that the associations that win in 2026 will not be the ones that are just adding more and more and more to offer for their supplier members. They're going to be the ones that are designing these intentional supplier relationships and these ecosystems. And they're not going to just be selling access to the members anymore, although that is probably one of the number one things that they're going to want from you. But what they're wanting for you to do is architect influence. How is it that they can meaningfully get in front of your audience? So I did leave 2 minutes here at the very end, Nicole. I would love to see if there are any questions in the chat. I'm happy to take like a minute or something like that to answer any questions or just open the line up for anybody that wants to contribute. I know there's some great thought leaders that are here with us today. If you want to contact me for any reason, this QR code is actually my contact information. It'll just drop right in your phone and you can reach me by just about any way.